We're not here to repeat the headlines. We're here to find out how everyday Americans are pushing back on this administration. Our program is you, the American people, doing what it takes to preserve democracy. This is Resistance Radio. Believe me, isn't that what you say right before telling another lie? This week, we're diving into Trump's tactics of lying, figuring out what the heck's been happening since 2016. Our guide through this land of smoke and mirrors is the book Disinformation, written by Lee McIntyre. It's all about the purposeful strategies Trump and his minions use. Helping me sort out the mess is my friend Charlene. She actually gave me a copy of the book, and I couldn't think of anyone better at helping us piece out the nuances of what's going on here. Charlene, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Russell. I'm glad to be here.
So we're going to hit in this book, Disinformation, and the author, right from the get-go, points out he didn't say misinformation. Give us a rundown. What's the difference there?
That single letter distinction is the core of the whole book. When Lee McIntyre started his work, he was moving around in the spaces where MAGA was originally gonna eventually bubble up from. He's been talking to these people and trying to understand how they think for much longer than they have been voting for Donald Trump. But that change, that miss to dis, it's an idea that this is something that is deliberate and on purpose and the point. So these lies and this lack of understanding isn't just something that, happened. It's something that was cultivated.
So there's method in this madness. The attack on America and including MAGA, the wrong information, even when it seems so obviously and just stupid, it's purposeful.
And it's not just being given wrong information, right? It's being given tons and tons and tons of contradictory, cherry-picked, warped, distorted evidence of false claims that slowly make it impossible for the recipient to even begin to identify what really is true. It's obfuscation of the truth. It's killing the truth.
So this is that Steve Bannon attack known as Flood the Zone. I really like McIntyre's analogy of Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade. Indy's hunting for the chalice, but the room he's in is got hundreds of fakes. You just can't find it. It's there, but it's hidden in the confusion. But I think there's even a better mental image of what's going on. Think of birds when they get scared. They flock. And a predator coming after them just can't go after the bird at once because all the others are swirling around. It's drawing the attention everywhere. The confusion is the protection. Anyway, before we get into the details of how this attack is manufactured, let's get some history on it. Where did this mess start out?
We can trace a lot of these tactics all the way back to Lenin, where his intelligence agency was just spreading huge amounts of falsehood to kind of defame the revolutionaries, et cetera, et cetera. It trickles all the way down to the multiple, three-letter agencies that they've got over there these days. But in the United States, our first big move of our first big disinformation campaign was the cigarette companies. I think it was in the 50s. They got together and they were like, how can we convince people to keep buying cigarettes, even though we've recently gotten, scientific studies that show that it's directly linked to lung cancer. And they just said, screw it. We'll just deny reality. They took out huge ads in newspapers. They, saying everything's safe, everything's fine. They paid scientists to do weird experiments that didn't prove or disprove anything, but kind of called into question the issue at hand. And I mean, by the time a couple years had gone by, it was broadly successful. There were public polls of the American populace and of the press that demonstrated that no one was really linking lung cancer to cigarettes. And, by the time they actually got caught in the 90s doing this on purpose, like memos being leaked that they knew that their products were hurting and killing people, it was too late. Everybody was addicted to nicotine by then.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so insidious. So anyway.
So like McIntyre goes into 5 like core tactics. The whole list really quick: cherry picking evidence, believing in conspiracy theories, illogical reasoning or like contradictory lies, fake experts, appealing to fake experts, and then having impossible standards for your opponent. And he does a really good set of examples of each of these like in the book. And like I think those are the best examples that I would love to like go through.
Yeah, let's hit them.
When it comes to cherry picking evidence, the in chapter 3, he goes into the fraudit review of ballots in Maricopa County, Arizona, which had concluded that Biden won the election in 2020. But Trump and his cronies continue to cherry pick statistics from the final report of that audit, suggesting they hadn't investigated these claims when the claims were long debunked. So they're just reaching for anything in there that sounds a little iffy so that they could continue to push the question, even though it was a resolved issue.
One of the insidious things about doing that is that it hit me while you were describing that, is that we in American culture have this underlying pin, that this belief that when somebody is giving you evidence, that if they know or see that evidence is contrary to that, they're gonna not present you this information. And so I'm hoping I'm making this clear, is that this tactic is saying, if you're doing this tactic, you're picking information that supports you and you ignore everything else that is true, and it doesn't matter. And the problem there is, well, 2 things. One, the creator of these lies knows and understands that they're baloney. 2, the American people, or, in our ethic, we're in good faith listening to these thoughts and reasoning. And so I want to bring this up to the listener and harp on the point that ethics matter so much. If we already know that people are liars, and as a society we need to be helping teach people this, is that if you have a consistent liar, then you have to put on that filter. This is a bullcrapper, and that anything they say has to be given real attention, and the media has not done that. And we just so many times take what they say and just say, oh, okay, and then present the other side.
These tactics they're weaselly, they're snake tactics, and I feel like a lot of us in the States are not tuned to the kind of it is rhetoric, right? And rhetoric sounds like an uppity school, an uppity private school subject, but it's really not. Rhetoric is just about how do you package the truth, and how are people using their words to explain, and using their personality to explain, and using their ideas and emotions to explain what they think is true or what they want you to believe is true. Like, rhetoric isn't fancy. Rhetoric is for everybody.
But in this case, it's not just rhetoric in terms of trying to get at the truth or present opposing information. That's not the game that's going on. This is a psychological attack, where the person that presents the counter argument knows that they're wrong. And so what we need as a society to be able to better do is to point out that when these people with questioned character, look, is there anybody that has more questioned character than Trump? Then you need to be putting some walls up to it. And as a journalist, you need to be starting out and warning your public again and again and again. Okay, we're going to say what they said, but you need to understand that this is the repetitive lies of somebody. This person cannot be trusted in anything they say. And say that about Trump, say that about his press secretary, and say it again. We just can't continue to do press with the old tactics that are not adapted for the current situation. We're dealing with professional paid liars, many times criminals, and you must interview them for what they are. And you got to warn the public.
Well, I mean, this goes directly into the second point, actually. And I think the second point sums itself up. Believing in conspiracy theories. And when we say believe, right, what we are talking about is the people who are deliberately doing the the disinformation. The people who are deliberately doing the disinformation are choosing to put their full weight behind the kinds of conspiracy theories that naturally are generated on their side. So like the the bamboo fibers was the example that McIntyre gives. In that same Arizona county audit, officials were at one point, and this is a quote, searching for bamboo fibers in the ballots themselves based on a Trumpian conspiracy theory that 40,000 ballots had been flown in from East Asia and stuffed into ballot boxes. So like somebody like Trump himself doesn't have to come up with this stuff. He just has to repeat it after he hears it and let all of that craziness keep generating itself.
It sort, who knows where that idea came from, that they came from East Asia, but it just bubbles up, and then if your propagandist can find it and then start amplifying it, then you hope it's true, and off to the races you go. And and to me it's really you can take these cherry picked evidences, and then you can kind of string together all these nonsense ideas into a somewhat coherent conspiracy. But it doesn't even have to be that good of a conspiracy. And it's just to mislead and get people off of the trail of truth.
And like I think that comes into the third point. And like illogical reasoning, it sounds kind of fancy. And what it really is at the core of the idea that illogical reasoning is a tactic is this is something that is designed to deliberately get people used to holding two contradictory ideas in their mind at the same time, making people really comfortable with cognitive dissonance, not asking people to evaluate the truth or validity of anything that they hold. So like my favorite talking point that comes up time and time again when you talk to MAGA voters is January 6th. So they'll say, "Oh, it was a peaceful protest. It was a peaceful protest. There was nothing wrong, nothing, blah 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 blah." And then, you press them on it, and like 5 minutes later, they're telling you that like it was Antifa false flag. There were plants from the FBI in the crowd to stir it up. And so it's like, I'm so sorry, friend. It is either peaceful or violent, and you have to choose one of those things. It can't be both. And this is something that you see again and again and again. And it just makes it really easy for all of these lies to really settle into the super squishy brains of the people who are just hanging on to these ideas.
That is such an awesome point. I hadn't put that together with the holding the two contradictory ideas in your mind and getting people comfortable with that. And it's not A or B. You're gonna force us to have both at the same time, even though they're illogical, and it just being comfortable with that.
It's very scary. I agree. And that's why the fourth point, the fake experts, is so frustrating for people who do have expertise, right? I can only imagine what it must be like to be someone who went to medical school or is a registered nurse or is a pharmacist or any of these things, and like listening to our Secretary of Health speak on matters of our nation's health. RFK Jr. is a really key fake expert, right? And his rhetoric on these problems that he sees in our country is already led to some measles outbreaks in Texas. And you know, I can only imagine. My heart goes out to all the people who truly, truly know better and feel hopeless Repeat the truth, my friends.
Yeah, the experts, they just must feel they're just in this soup of impossible lies, something they can't do anything about. But I don't think that's the case. During the pandemic, doctors really helped to save the lives of so many patients because the people trusted them, and they were able to say to their patients, ignore the White House. You need to get these shots. It's going to save your life. And the mess coming out of the White House is just that. It's just unbelievable junk. And, and here we are again. The stuff that RFK Jr. is putting out about health is just wrong about vaccines and the food pyramid. It's just there's no science behind it. And so, as each of us find our place in this resistance, do doctors have a spot? Yes, they do, and they need to be speaking up and taking the advantage of those means that they have to reach people. Turn these lies of the administration into the avenues of killing the support that MAGA has given the administration.
Well, the final point, impossible expectations for the other side. So like MAGA holds all forms of liberalism to just impossible standards of proof, right? So like for example, when we talk about the 2020 election, we're looking at all of these court cases that MAGA lost. And when we're looking at these court cases, like the MAGA talking point is like, well, it was thrown out. It was just thrown out on circumstance. It was thrown out during discovery. Da, 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 da. And when you look at each of these court cases, what you find is that some of them were based on a single affidavit of a single person's testimony that they saw one suspicious thing. And like, I'm so sorry, my friends, but that does not a court case make. And of course, those things are going to get thrown out, right? When that happens to MAGA, they don't view it as sufficient evidence that they were wrong. They need there to be some form of evidence against their false evidence in order for them to believe it, right? So it's not enough for their proof to be total crap. It's only enough for them if you can prove that it was total crap or prove otherwise. It's incredible. It's incredible.
So those are the methods used in the attacks. And in part 2 of this episode, we're going to get into what McIntyre says are the best ways to combat the disinformation. But before we close here, I want to give you, the listener, some resources. We all know that the biggest propagator of Trump's lies is Fox News, our generation's Joseph Goebbels. But you can do something about it. There are several groups and organizations working to limit the influence of Fox. One of those is foxtakedown.com. I really like that you can join in their protest, and they give you some really good resources. Other sites you may want to check out: Media Matters for America and FAIR, which stands for Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. Thank you for tuning in this week, and I hope you'll join us for the conclusion of this episode. Have a story that needs to be told? Send an email to russellspurradio@gmail.com. Support for our show can be sent through Venmo at Resistance Radio. And remember, history is made by those who show up.
Resistance Radio.